As you have physical illness, you have spiritual illness. And people, because of their certain deficiencies in their predilections, they have a certain low quotient for many things, low tolerance. Meaning, people, the Talmud tells us you're able to tell a person, Bekiso, Bekoso, Bekaso, through a person's pocketbook, the way you drink, and the way you spend money. If you look at these three areas, you could have a person pretty much summed up. What's Bekiso? A person, is he miserly? Is he stingy? Is he generous? Is he middle of the road? What does he spend on? What does he spend? What does he not spend? That's one aspect of a person, to see how a person exactly functions. Bekoso, when a person drinks wine, do you drink it in one gulp? Do you drink it daintily? Or you drink it normally? As a normal person. You drink it daintily, the person is what? He thinks he's God's gift to humanity. Drinks, he thinks he's, one of these high rollers. The way he drinks, thinks he's God. He's pompous. He's arrogant. Person gulps it down. We're talking wine. He's a glutton. Just guzzles it. Person drinks normally, as a normal person drinks, that means he's a middle of the road person. Through one's anger. How easily to get angry? Do you anger? For what do you get angry? Over what? For how long do you remain angry? Evaluating each one of these three areas of a person's life, you have him pretty much pegged exactly where he stands. Bekiso, Bekoso, Bekaso. Now, a person who has all these deficiencies, how do you get him balanced? To be more humble, to be less earthy, to be more patient, to be more tolerant. The man needs upgrading in every one of these areas. He needs a little bit of more than tweaking. He needs a little twisting sometimes. You have to wrench him out of that extreme position, to pull him out of it, to get him to the center. How do you do it? So the same thing here. The person has a very low tolerance for other people. And therefore, he gets angry. He loses it. He's unforgiving. You're only unforgiving. Why? Because a person feels, where do you have a right to slight me or not do what I ask? It has to do directly with one's arrogance. So how does one overcome all these so-called inhibitions? We have all kinds of baggage due to many things. Either we're born with it, acquired, bad habits, whatever it may be. That's what the Rambam is speaking about right now. How does one how could one be healed from this? From these deficiencies which relate to what? To his behavior, to his sensitivities. Miu bal chema, a person who gets angry, he has a tempest, anger, explosive, volcanic. How does he deal with it? Omer lahanik atzmo huka v'kula leyargish klal. A person who's out of control, who has no control of himself, that person is really has a certain degree of instability. He's unstable. Every human being could control himself. I'll give you an example. Person has an uncontrollable temper. He says, I can't help myself. But I guarantee you, if he's in the presence of a person who's very wealthy, where his displaying this behavior, he's going to have consequences. I guarantee he's going to control himself. He's going to behave himself. Every person has the ability to control him, as long as you're a stable person. Person knows he has to really take charge of his anger. He has to make up his mind that even if somebody embarrasses him, insults him, curses him, he's gonna bite his tongue, will not react, will not respond. Although he may be seething inside, he's not going to allow it to consume his life. And if you repeat this many times, you're in a position, you allow yourself to be abused, verbally abused, denied things that you have a right to. After a while, get used to it. Get used to it. And this is how the person balances out. Lo yagish klal. Vilgabash bluye schovos habvazus es lovsheim. You wear worn-out material, which embarrasses the wearer of this kind of attire. Chiyotze b'dvar me'elu. And similar things which put him in a position which not only is he not acknowledged, especially he's actually looked down upon. Achiyako gova halev mimenu. Excuse me. I skipped. Vimu gova halev. If he has a inflated ego, Yanagatz bizoyin harbe v'yesh l'matim in akol. He should sit in a disgraceful location. He should pick the location which is barely noticeable. And he should wear these inferior kinds of clothing, which a person feels embarrassed wearing that kind of clothing. Until ultimately it'll uproot this arrogance from his heart. Until finally he reaches that midpoint, which is the good path. That's called derech hayosher, the straight path. You know, it's interesting. Most people, what are they driven by? By their egos. They'll do many things to get ahead. But what do you want to get ahead? You get ahead. You want to get ahead at the cost, at the expense of anybody. People will badmouth another person, that other person should be seen negatively, so you should overtake that person in position at a firm. Sometimes you're in the elevator, you go up in the office, and you hear two people talking, and they're talking about somebody else who's either their coworker, and you should hear what they say. And not praiseworthiness. They're not being praiseworthy. Finding fault. And if you find fault, why do you speak about somebody else's fault? Evidently, because somehow it touches you in a certain way. You feel denied. He has a better position than you have. He's paid more than you're paid. And therefore it bothers you. But why does it bother you? Maybe he's there longer. Maybe he's more qualified. Maybe whatever it is. So because there's a degree of expectation, entitlement, which emanates from one's sense of self-worth, that you feel you worthy of that, therefore you feel you have rights. So everything's driven by one's belief of entitlement, that he's worthy, he deserves. So what do you have to do? You have to somehow take the edge off that. How do you take the edge off that? To become more humble. How do you become more humble? Put yourself in a position that you're humiliated. And you know you're going to be humiliated. And the humiliation is only considered extreme because you're pompous. Another person wouldn't be affected the way you're affected. But because you feel you're the so-called, what it's all about, so why am I being mistreated? The Maharal of Prague writes, what is the basis for anger? Says something interesting. The basis for anger is arrogance. If I say to I tell somebody something, and he doesn't listen, you become upset. And if you tell him a second time, and a third, you become angry. Why? If I told you, how do you not listen? But the question is, who are you? If I'm getting upset because it's not in your best interest, you say to a child, you discipline your child, and your child doesn't listen, the child actually is going to hurt himself, that upsets you. That has nothing to do with arrogance. But if you tell another person to do something and he doesn't follow your order as you dictated he should follow, and if he doesn't follow, he has to dance to your tune, he has to step your step. Why? I dare you. How do you have the audacity to not listen to what I tell you? I once had a share in a certain firm, and there was a certain person who worked in that firm, and he had a right, he used to bring deals to the firm, and he had a right to a certain percentage. And the owner of the firm always shortchanged him, always shortchanged him. And it's the equivalent of stealing. He had a right to a larger percentage, and he would give a much less percentage that he deserved. So he was, after a while, he came to him and said, by the way, according to our arrangement, he would intimidate him by getting angry. That he knew he was conditioned, the owner of the firm, if anybody even questions the way he divides that pie, you don't want to be subject to his wrath, his anger. And he would make the person feel that he's sorry he opened his mouth. Yeah. I said a share in this firm, and the person came to complain to me, and I knew because it was this person's personality. And I said to him, I want to explain you something. If you want to succeed in life, you take what's yours and not what somebody else's. And immediately, he started to get hot under the collar. But you realize, he's not putting money in my pocket. And this person is supposed to be a little bit of a student of mine. And, you think you're high and mighty, but you understand, you're not as high as you think you are. And because you're not as high, you're not as mighty as you are, as you believe you are. And I told him, and he was like offended. I said, why are you offended? Okay. Another person came in as a partner in the firm, and I told him, and this new person was a friend of this other person who was always shortchanged. And I said to him, this person who came in was a lawyer, a CPA, and he had an MBA. He was very qualified, very well-weathered. And I said to him, whenever you do deals, I'm telling you, you'll get what's right for yours, but I want you to stick up for this other person. This other person is the underdog here, and unless somebody within the firm, when you divide the pie, sticks up for him, he's always going to be left out in the cold. Okay? And he did stick up for him. And this other person didn't like it. It reached a point where not only did this person who was shortchanged the little guy, he tried to shortchange the big guy who came in. You know what he did? There was a certain profit, a few $1 million, and they put it into his account. He says, something, I'm going to teach you a lesson. I'm holding the money. You want it, sue me. The man had conniptions. They had conniptions. He gave him a taste of his own treatment. As you denied this other person what was rightfully his, firstly, it's not simple, it's yours. That's number one. He told him. And even if it is yours, but all the times that you did owe me, and you didn't give me what was right from mine, I'm taking it now. Till today, I'm going back 20 years. He still talks about how he was shortchanged by this person. This person couldn't care less. Couldn't care less. He left the firm with this few $1 million, and that's the end of the story. But it was his personality. It was unacceptable. It was a level of arrogance that where do you dare even to question him? You understand? The Rambam rules in the laws of Talmud Torah that if you're a teacher cannot be a kapton. When a person teaches, you cannot feel that the student has no right to ask questions. Because the only reason why a student is a student, he's there to learn. And learning means that if he doesn't understand because you didn't explain it well enough, That means you have to repeat it. And if you don't, you feel it should not be repeated, then you shouldn't be a teacher. And that's cited in the Rambam in the laws of the dissemination of Torah. It says the student cannot be a baishon. The student cannot be a person who gets embarrassed easily, because that means you're going to keep your mouth closed even if you don't understand. So what's the point of attending the class, the lecture? And the teacher who teaches, if he's a kapton, that he's very demanding on his time and he's not willing to repeat or explain well enough, he shouldn't be a teacher. That's what it's about. But what is this all about? If you're teaching, why do you feel a student has no right to ask the question? Not everybody's as perfect as you are. So repeat it. They should have understood it. It's part of the person's arrogance. It all goes back to arrogance. And when you finally reach that midpoint, you'll be able to continue going this way for the rest of your life. And this is the approach to every one of the tendencies we have to get to the midpoint. If you're at one extreme end and you have to get to the midpoint, you have to go and behave to the extreme. Person's pompous, sit in a location you feel disgraced. Wear clothing that an ordinary person would wear those kinds of clothing. And you should behave in this manner over an extended period of time, until ultimately his behavior pattern will be on a good path. And again, that's the midpoint, which is regarding every predilection which we could have. There's certain predilections or tendencies you just have to stay away from. Even the midpoint is not good. Like, person, I'll be semi-arrogant. I mean, arrogance is not good, period. Now, what are these tendencies you should stay away and try to totally expunge it from your personality, from your emotion? What are they? You have to go to the opposite extreme. This predilection of arrogance. We said, eventually you come to the midpoint. It's something you have to always continuously suppress. Because if you don't suppress it, it's coming back. It festers, it's coming back. It's take over your life. You always have to be on the defense, always pressing it, hammering it down, always. The ego has to be hammered down totally. Because if you don't deflate it, it inflates automatically. God forbid, people have certain types of cancer, and they have to be drained continuously from fluids. You finish draining whatever that has to be drained. Within 2 hours, person has to be drained again. It's a never-ending thing until the person ultimately dies of dehydration or doesn't have enough electrolytes, whatever it is. The person dies from this. But you have to continuously, because the moment you finish, it reappears. It rears its head. Arrogance continuously rears its head unless you continuously suppress it and try to snuff it out. That's the nature of human being. Now, why? Why this particular characteristic of gaiva, of arrogance, self-centeredness, pompousness? Why is that characteristic? Now let's talk. Every human being has an evil inclination. Every one of us. What does the evil inclination do for us or to us? It allows us to believe something that's not acceptable is acceptable. It allows us to rationalize. I'll give you an example. A person who's truly honest and lives above reproach, integrity, would he consider, as much as he's a dedicated employee, would he consider for a moment to embezzle? He has money. He needs money to pay his rent. He's to put his hand in the till and take money without permission. If the man himself is a person of integrity, lives above reproach, ethical moral, he would not take that money. He prefers to be put out on the street and dispossessed than taking anything which is not rightfully his. It's not even a consideration. So why would a person consider it? I think I have a right to. I'm dedicated to the firm. I've given a pound of flesh for this firm. I'm sure the boss wouldn't mind it. Why don't you ask him? Why are you rationalizing? Because I think I have a right. It's not right that I should be disgraced and embarrassed. Well, if you have to do the wrong thing to prevent that, so that's life. Life is you get the short end of the stick. Therefore what? That's the reality. The answer is your ego will not tolerate it. It all goes back to ego. I will not eat and buy that cut of meat. That cut of meat for what? For the poor. I must have. Why must you have? All the drives and incentives and motivations in people's lives is because they believe who they are. And because of who they are, therefore, they set a standard for themselves. Why does a person live up to the Joneses? Right? Or to the Schwartzes? Why? You think a guy has a 2,200 square foot apartment on the 98th floor. Do you think it bothers me? Do you think it touches me? I'm okay if I don't have that. And if I don't have a less. But many things, if your peer group has that, you want it. What do you want it? Because if I'm a peer and I can't have it, that means I'm less than my peer. And that becomes a problem. And if that's the way you value less than a peer, it's all based on what you have, what you don't have, then you want to have. So what's motivating you to climb to the next level? It's all what you feel you're worthy of. At the last class, I think I was telling over a story, which I'm not going to record.